The day my father was buried, my aunt handed me a cardboard box and said, "Your dad wanted you to have this junk." Inside was an old wristwatch. Scratched dial, worn leather strap, the kind you'd find at a garage sale for $2. I held it in both hands while she walked back to the buffet table and refilled her wine glass. That watch is why I'm standing in this house today. And it's why my aunt and my cousin are not. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. I'm a middle school English teacher in Columbus, Ohio. My father Daniel raised me alone after my mother left when I was 4. We didn't have much. We had the house on Birchwood Lane, a 3-bedroom Craftsman he bought in 1998 for $80,000, and we had each other. He worked as an electrician for 26 years. He never remarried. He coached my soccer team. He made pancakes on Sunday mornings in the shape of animals. He was the most disciplined, patient man I have ever known. He died in March. A stroke. He was 58 years old. His sister, my Aunt Renee, arrived from Phoenix 2 days before the funeral with her son Marcus, who is 34 and has spent most of his adult life borrowing money from people and not paying it back. I had not seen either of them in 6 years. The last time was Christmas 2018, when Marcus asked my father for $15,000 to invest in a logistics startup, and my father quietly said no. Renee didn't speak to him for almost 2 years after that, but grief has a way of making people suddenly remember family. They showed up at my door with a casserole and a lot of opinions about funeral arrangements. I was too exhausted to fight. I let them help. That was my first mistake. My father died without a formal will, or so everyone assumed. He had talked about getting one drafted for years. I knew he'd met with a lawyer named Mr. Hadley the previous fall, but I had no paperwork, no confirmation, nothing in his filing cabinet except old tax returns and utility bills. Renee found out within 48 hours of arriving that the house on Birchwood Lane was now worth $420,000. I watched her do the math in her eyes at the kitchen table. "You know, Claire," she said, stirring her coffee, "this house is really too big for one person, and the property taxes alone on a teacher's salary." "I'm fine," I said. "I'm just saying, it might make sense to sell, split whatever equity there is between family." I looked at her. "Dad left the house to me." She smiled. "Honey, he didn't leave anything to anyone in writing. That means probate, and in probate, family has standing." She wasn't wrong about probate. She was wrong about everything else. The watch had been sitting on my nightstand since the funeral. Brown leather strap, gold casing engraved on the back for Claire. The answer is always inside. Dad. I cried when I read it. I assumed it was just sentiment, a message about looking inward, something poetic he planned to explain to me someday, and never got the chance. It wasn't until the third night after the funeral, when I couldn't sleep and was sitting at my kitchen table at 2 a.m, that I actually turned it over in my hands and noticed the back panel wasn't flush. There was a tiny seam. I pressed it. Nothing. I pressed harder, at an angle, and it clicked. The back of the watch popped open. Inside, wrapped in a piece of blue electrical tape, was a folded square of paper. I peeled the tape back with shaking fingers. The paper was a typed note in my father's handwriting. He always typed his important things and then signed them by hand at the bottom. It read, "Claire, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I hope you found this sooner rather than later." I did get that will drafted. Mr. Hadley has the original. My copy is in the green lockbox in the garage, second shelf, behind the WD-40. The combination is your birthday. Don't let anyone tell you what you're owed. You know who you are. Love, Dad. I sat very still for a long time. Then I went to the garage. The lockbox was exactly where he said. The combination worked on the first try. Inside was a manila envelope with copy, not for fulling, stamped in red across the front. I opened it at the workbench under the fluorescent light with my hands shaking so badly I tore the corner. It was a valid, notarized, last will and testament, dated September 14th of the previous year. Witnessed by 2 neighbors, the Pattersons from next door, who had lived on Birchwood Lane for 20 years. My father had left the house and all its contents to me, his only child. There was a small bequest to his church. There was nothing for Renee. There was nothing for Marcus. I photographed every page with my phone. Then I put the envelope back in the lockbox and the lockbox back behind the WT-40. I went inside, brushed my teeth, and got into bed. I did not sleep, but I did think very clearly for the first time since my father died. Here is what I understood by morning. Renee did not know about the will. If she had, she would have behaved differently, more carefully, more legally. What she was doing was operating on the assumption that there was no will, which meant she thought she had time to position herself before probate began. She would try to establish presence, influence, maybe even claim that my father had made verbal promises. She might try to pressure me into a sale and a split before any official process started. She might even try something worse. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I showed my hand. I called Mr. Hadley's office when it opened at 9. His assistant confirmed that yes, a will had been filed with their office, and that I was named executor. She was warm and professional. I made an appointment for the following Thursday, and I asked her not to contact anyone else until we'd spoken in person. She agreed. Then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. Marcus started that same afternoon. He came into the kitchen while I was grading papers and sat down across from me without being invited. So look, he said, I know this is hard, but you have to be practical. Mom and I have been talking, and honestly, the smartest thing for everyone is to get the house listed fast before the market softens. We've already reached out to a real estate agent just to get a number. I looked up from my papers. You reached out to an agent about my father's house. Our family's house. Marcus, I said. My father's name is on the deed. My name will be on the deed. This is not a family house. He leaned back. Something shifted in his face. You know, Dad, your grandfather always said this property should stay in the family. All of it, not just for one person. My grandfather has been dead for 15 years, and my father made his wishes clear. Did he? Marcus tilted his head, because from what Mom says, there was never anything in writing. I went back to my papers. I think you should go check on your mother. He sat there for another moment, then left. That evening, I called my friend Dana, who works in real estate law in Cincinnati. We went to college together. I told her everything, the watch, the note, the will, what Marcus had said. She listened without interrupting and then said, Claire, do not tell them about the will yet. Why? Because right now you don't know what they're planning to do. If they're just going to push you verbally, you show the will and it's over. But if they're planning something more, forging signatures, making false claims in probate court, anything like that, you want to catch them in the act. You want documentation. You want them to commit to whatever lie they're building before you knock it down. That feels risky. It is, but the alternative is you show the will, they back off, and if they were planning something fraudulent, you never prove it and they just try again later with someone else. She paused. How sure are you that they're planning something? I thought about Marcus's face, the way he said our family's house without blinking. Pretty sure, I said. Then wait, but document everything from this point forward. Every conversation, every email, every text, and call me if anything moves fast. I started documenting. Over the next 2 weeks, here's what I documented. Renee called 3 mortgage contacts to ask hypothetical questions about a property sale where the deed was in transition. Marcus emailed 2 developers in the area. I know because he accidentally used the family computer in the living room and didn't log out of his account, and I saw the sent folder before he realized. One developer responded with genuine interest. Marcus told him the property would be available within 60 days. He told him the title was clear. He said he was co-owner by inheritance. None of that was true. I forwarded everything to Dana. She said, okay, now we're talking about wire fraud and deed fraud. This is federal territory. I'm going to connect you with someone. The someone was a real estate attorney named Mr. Okafor based in Columbus who had handled 3 deed fraud cases in the past 2 years. I met him in his office on a Tuesday morning and brought printouts of every email, every text, every note I'd taken. He read through all of it without expression, and then he looked at me and said, "You've been very disciplined." "My father raised me to be patient," I said. "That patience is going to pay off." He put the papers down. "Here's what I want to do." Mr. Okafor's plan was straightforward but required precise timing. We would allow Marcus and Renee to proceed to the point of attempting to sign over the deed. The moment they put pen to paper on a fraudulent transfer, the fraud was complete and provable. At that point, we would present the will, present my documentation, and notify the authorities. He had a contact at the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit who had worked with him on the previous cases. A phone call would be made. What if they get cold feet before that? I asked. They won't, he said. The developer has already expressed interest. They have money in their eyes. People with money in their eyes don't get cold feet. He was right. I went home and I kept teaching, and I kept grading papers, and I kept having dinner with Renee and Marcus and listening to them talk about the developer and the offer and the timeline. I asked questions sometimes, careful ones, to keep them talking. Renee thought she was bringing me around. She started saying things like, "You'll have your share, and we'll make sure you're taken care of." I nodded and said things like, "That's really thoughtful, and I just want to do what Dad would have wanted." At night, I texted Mr. Okafor every update. The hardest part was a Thursday evening about 3 weeks in, when Renee sat down next to me on the couch and put her hand over mine. Her voice went soft. "I know how much you loved your dad," she said. "I did too. He was my brother. But he wasn't always practical, Claire. He left you in a difficult position. You're alone here. You're grieving. You're trying to manage a property that's worth more than you'll make in 10 years of teaching. We're family. We're trying to help you." I looked at her hand on mine. She had my father's same long fingers. "Thank you, Renee," I said. "That means a lot." She squeezed my hand and went to bed. I sat on the couch for a long time after that. I want to be honest about this part, because I think it matters. I almost went upstairs and woke her up. I almost said, "There's a will. It's at the lawyer's office. Please just go home." Not because I was weak, but because she looked so much like my father in that moment. And I missed him. And I was so tired of performing calm. But I thought about what Dana had said. I thought about the email Marcus sent to the developer, claiming he was co-owner of a house that wasn't his. I thought about what would happen to the next family if I let them walk away from this without consequences. I stayed on the couch. I did not go upstairs. 2 days later, Marcus told me over breakfast that the developer had made a formal offer, $400,000, cash, fast close. "We'd need you to sign some paperwork," he said, casual as if he was asking me to pass the salt. "Standard stuff, just acknowledging the sale." "What kind of paperwork?" I asked. "Just a quitclaim deed." "To simplify the title transfer. Our lawyer is drawing it up." I kept my face neutral. A quitclaim deed would transfer any interest I had in the property to them, making their fraudulent ownership claim appear clean to the developer's title company. It was exactly what Mr. Okafor had told me to watch for. "Okay," I said. "When?" "Monday. The developer wants to move by end of week." I texted Mr. Okafor under the table. He responded within 2 minutes. "Monday works. I'll make the call." Monday morning. The kitchen table on Birchwood Lane. Renee had printed the paperwork herself. 4 pages. Professional looking. With a notary stamp I later found out was purchased online for $40. The developer's representative, a man named Greg, sat across from me with a portfolio. He seemed nervous in a way I didn't fully understand yet. I later learned he'd received an anonymous tip that the title situation was unusual and had already privately contacted his own attorney. Marcus sat at the head of the table. He had dressed up. He was wearing a collared shirt. Renee put the quitclaim deed in front of me, a pen on top of it. "Just your signature on the last page," she said. I looked at the document. I looked at Marcus. I looked at Renee. "Before I sign anything," I said, "I want to make sure we're all on the same page about the property." Marcus spread his hands. "Of course. What questions do you have?" "I guess my only question is..." I reached into the tote bag beside my chair and took out a manila envelope. "Whether you've both had a chance to read this." I set it on the table in front of Renee. She looked at it. She didn't touch it. "What is that?" Marcus said. "It's Dad's will," I said, "executed last September. Notarized. Filed with his estate attorney, Mr. Hadley, whose number is on the cover page. It names me as sole heir and executor. The house is mine. The deed is in my name. There's nothing to quitclaim." The room was very quiet. Then Marcus said, "That's not real." "It is. Dad, your father, he told me..." "My father didn't tell you anything about this house," I said, "because it wasn't your business. He left me everything and he documented it legally, and he hid the location of the document in a watch he gave me at his funeral, because he knew, Marcus, he knew there was a reason to be careful." Renee's face had gone completely still. "Greg, the developer's representative, had pushed his chair back 6 inches from the table. "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding," Renee said, very quietly. "There's been a misunderstanding," I agreed. "You misunderstood what you were allowed to do." The knock at the front door came at that exact moment, which, I will admit, was better timing than I had any right to expect. Mr. O'Cover had said the agents would wait until they heard from me that the paperwork was on the table. I had texted him 3 minutes before I took the envelope out of my bag. I opened the door. 2 FBI agents stood on my father's porch. One of them asked if this was the Birchwood Lane property, and I said yes, and they said they had a few questions about a reported deed fraud attempt, and I stepped aside and let them in. What happened next took about 40 minutes and was not dramatic in the way you might imagine. It was paperwork and careful voices, and one moment where Marcus tried to explain to one of the agents that I had a history of anxiety and was not always reliable, and the agent looked at him with an expression of polite disinterest and said, "Sir, the will has been independently verified by the filing attorney's office. Is there something else you'd like to add?" Marcus did not add anything else. Renee cried. Real tears, I think. Not for what she'd done, but for getting caught. There is a difference between those 2 kinds of tears, and I have learned to tell them apart. Greg, the developer's representative, stayed for an additional conversation with the agents. He had his own documentation to provide, it turned out. He had not been in on it. He was as clean as anyone at that table. My aunt and my cousin were not arrested that day. Arrests came later, after a full investigation, after the FBI reviewed the emails Marcus had sent to the developer and the forged notary stamp, and 3 other communications I hadn't even known about. The charges included wire fraud and attempted deed fraud. I won't detail the legal outcome because it's still partially ongoing, but I will say this. They will not be selling anyone's house anytime soon. Mr. Hadley formally probated the will the following week. My name went on the deed. I live on Birchwood Lane. I make pancakes on Sunday mornings sometimes, not in the shape of animals because I don't have my father's patience for that. Maybe I'll get there. The watch is on my nightstand. I wound it last week and it still runs. My father was an electrician who coached soccer and made pancakes and spoke quietly and let people underestimate him his whole life. He taught me that the most important moves are the ones you make before anyone knows you're playing. He put the answer inside a watch and trusted me to find it. I found it, Dad. And if you're watching from wherever you are, I hope you saw the look on Marcus's face when I put that envelope on the table. I think you would have laughed. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had someone underestimate you because they thought you didn't know what you had? Leave a comment below. I read every single one. And if this story stayed with you, I hope you'll share it with someone who needs to hear it today. There are a lot of people out there sitting on something valuable and being told it's worthless. They need to know. Open the watch. The answer is always inside.